How far in advance should an owner start to think about this and prepare for these conversations?
In my opinion, the day they open the business. Yesterday is when they should be doing it. Too many people I meet with, I sit down with them and they're 65, 70 years old and they're done. And I do a valuation and the business is not worth what they thought it was worth. A business that maximizes sale price is an easier business to run. It's more profitable business. It's easier. It's a lot more fun. And then you don't have to sell it.
The home services industry is changing, and the business owners who adapt will lead it. We bring contractors and industry leaders together to break down what's actually working: data, operations, and strategies that drive results. This is Beyond the Truck Roll.
Welcome to Beyond the Truck Roll. My name is Wes Friednash, and today we have an awesome guest, Patrick Lange from Business Modification Group. Patrick, tell us about yourself. Who are you and why should people care about listening to today's podcast?
Well, I appreciate the intro and I appreciate you having me on, Wes. It's great to see you again. I am a business broker for Business Modification Group, and we specialize in the sale of heating and air companies and plumbing companies nationwide.
Yeah, so I think that's a good segue into today's topic. Whether you're thinking about selling in 12 months or 10 years, today's episode is all about how HVAC owners can maximize value and avoid mistakes we see far too often when it comes to selling their business. So the first thing I really kind of want to dive into today with you, Patrick, is really the landscape when it comes to M&A right now, because I think that's a hot topic. You hear things like Nexstar getting rid of PE groups, and you just hear there's a lot of this happening right now. So what's driving the surge in HVAC acquisitions right now?
Yeah, the surge has been going on for a while. Obviously, you and I have known each other for a number of years and talked about it over the years. Heating and air was kind of ripe for acquisitions. It's happened historically. It'll happen again. It's a fragmented industry, right? I live in Florida. I don't know any husband dumb enough in the state of Florida to tell his wife he's not fixing the air conditioner. And that's, nationwide. I think we see that. And so the industry is fairly recession resistant. COVID helped prove that, right? Everybody couldn't go to work, but heating and air guys could get up and go to work. Some of the best years many people had in the space. And so, they call it the silver tsunami, right? There's a lot of people that are reaching retirement age now. Baby boomers are in their 60s and looking at potentially selling. And so I think it's everything lining up has created a wealth of opportunity for both buyers and sellers.
Who's buying the companies today?
Yeah, it's all over the place. So I sell a lot of smaller companies, right? I sell a lot of companies doing $1.5 million in sales to say $5 million in sales. We'll do a few a year over 10 million. But I think this year we'll do 20, 25 companies, and probably 20 of them were less than $8 million in sales. And so for those specific companies, it really the buyer pool's all over the place. I'll sell some to big private equity groups who are consolidating. We'll sell some to we call mom and pop owners, right? You're in one area or one city or one town and want to expand to the other. We help kids buy their parents' business out. And we sell a lot of insurance agent or bankers or people from other industries that want to get in the trades for whatever reason, and they're entering the trade. So really the buyer pool is pretty diverse currently.
That's really interesting because I think you really only in the news hear about the PE or roll-ups or stuff like that. And so it's interesting hearing that there's more buyers than just the PE groups out there.
Oh, yeah, probably. So let's say I did 25 deals this year. Probably 10 or 12 of them were to private equity or some financially backed buyer, and the rest were not. So that's not all who's buying companies. And you hear people, I think PE gets a bad name sometimes. I think like anything else, right? Are there bad car mechanics? Well, sure there is, right? But are there bad PE people, PE groups? Sure there is. I don't think everybody is. And I think what people often overlook is that private equity entering the space really in most markets has raised pricing. They didn't buy companies and then cut costs, cut pricing. And from a seller perspective, private equity entering the space and buying companies has raised prices from sellers. So if you look at it from those two things, it's been a good thing for many people in the space.
So when it comes to Owners selling their business, do they typically care who buys it, or are they kind of agnostic to the whole idea?
Yeah, I think it really depends from who the seller is. We have a lot of people that it's their legacy, right? It's their life, and they're super picky on who takes over, what experience they have, what they're going to do. The reality is once you sell your business, you've lost control, right? They're going to do whatever they want to do. And so I don't have any buyers that come to the table and say, "Hey, we're going to fire people and raise prices and not do a good job." But I think for some buyers, they want to make sure they're handing their employees and they're handing their customers over to people that they trust and they feel are going to do a good job for them. So I think for some, and a majority of them, it really does matter who buys. Now, there are some people who were growing a business just to sell, and it's just a financial exit, and it wasn't their life's work or their family wasn't raised in the office kind of thing. And so for those, it's all about maximizing sale price. But I think the majority of people that we work with, who buys and what they do is important.
And then when it comes to my last question on this topic here,
All right.
it's
Working from home
it's
today, so
yeah,
my
it's
boy
okay. I have a
Hank
dog
decided
too.
to join the podcast, so I apologize for that.
It's okay. Maybe we can ask him how he thinks about this stuff.
He's participated in a lot of these, or at least he's heard a lot of them, so he probably has better answers than I do.
Last question on this topic here. How do valuations look compared to like a few years ago? Are they stronger today? Are they worse? Like what's kind of going on there?
So I think it really depends on where in the market you are. As I mentioned, we sell a lot of smaller companies, and smaller companies didn't skyrocket in multiple the way larger companies did. And so we haven't seen a compression from a multiple standpoint there as well. A company doing $2 million in sales today is selling the same as a company doing $2 million in sales did 2 years ago. Where we've seen pricing pressure is at the upper end of the market. So companies doing 10, 15, $20 million, they went crazy from a multiple standpoint. And now we're seeing some compression at that end of the market.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think a lot of people overpaid for them. I think a lot of these private equity groups paid too much money. I think they also bought at the market peak. And I've also seen where before, if I had a company doing 10 or $15 million in sales, I'd call 10 companies and it was kind of a bidding war. They were all trying to get them. Now some of those companies have slowed down their buying, partially because of integration, right? They bought a bunch of companies and they weren't incredible at in integrating those companies. And I think we've seen a slowdown in heating and air. Obviously, I know you follow the industry as a whole. Recent AHRI numbers are out, and equipment shipments have been down the last few months. And so I think we're seeing a pullback in the market a little bit. That, and we talked about it before, but COVID was good for the industry, and a lot of people got a lot of new equipment, and there's not the change outs that needed to happen, right? And so
Yeah.
there's many companies out there, and this is not meant to be a jab at any one company or any one philosophy, but there's a lot of companies who don't fix air conditioners, right? They sell everybody new air conditioners. And so if they bought one of those companies and new equipment sales have slowed down, then there's been pressure on their bottom line and they're doing what they can to fix that. And so there's not as many buyers scrambling for those buying at the upper end of the market, in my opinion. And money got more expensive, right? When all this
Yeah.
started, we had record low interest rates. And now interest rates have slowly come up and come up. And so money's not as cheap.
Okay, so I think that segues nice into what I would like to talk about next, which is what buyers actually care about when they're looking at acquisitions. So my first question for you would be what separates a sellable HVAC business from an average one or one that's probably not going to sell?
Yeah, there's a few things that go into it. So it's hard to say one thing dictates that. I can tell you buyers love businesses built on service and repair, right? We're talking about companies that just do change outs and do change outs. Well, they're a company that's built on sales, not on service. And buyers love service. Buyers love maintenance agreements because of the consistency of the income, the stickiness of the customer, right? If your customer is paying you for an annual maintenance agreement, whether it's 2 visits, 3 visits, 1 visit, whatever it is, they're paying for their own loyalty, right? If I'm paying you $200 to $300 a year for a maintenance agreement and my air conditioner breaks, I'm calling the guy or girl that I'm paying $200 a year to come back out and fix it. So the customer's paying for their own loyalty. They love long-term employees. right? There's a lot of turnover that's taken place in the industry over the last few years, and they love long-term employees. They love long-term customer bases, right? You've been in business 20 or 30 years and been servicing generations sometimes of customers. Buyers love that. Um, Good reputation. When a buyer requests information on one of our listings, one of the first places they go to is Google and see what are the people saying about them? What are customers saying? What's the market saying? So those types of things. So those are kind of the key things. Clean books and records too is another thing. There's a lot of people who treat their business like it's their personal checking account, and so they run everything through it, trying to save taxes. Well, when it's time to get paid, you need to be able to show some income. So that's another thing that buyers love seeing. Those are kind of the key things that I think really separate them and from what's selling at the top of the market versus what's not.
It's interesting. And then, like, one thing that I keep hearing from you is really on the recurring revenue maintenance agreements, stuff like that. Why do buyers put such a premium on that?
Well, it's repeat revenue, first off. One, if you look at a company that has high maintenance agreements, typically they're more profitable. They're doing a better job retaining staff, right? If you've got stuff to carry you in the slow time and the shoulder seasons and keep your guys busy and able to retain staff, that's super helpful. Once again, customer stickiness. If they're buying a business that's all changeouts, they know when they buy it, they've got to keep that marketing spend up in order to keep the phone ringing, in order to keep changeouts going. Where when it's a business built on service and repair, once again, typically the marketing spend is down lower. It's
Yeah.
repeat revenue from existing customers who already know, like, and trust you. You're in the customer's home more times a year, better relationships, more upsell opportunities. You can talk about indoor air quality. You can talk about increased filtration. You can talk about these other things. And so it's deepening the client relationship, and all those things are super helpful and super important to a buyer.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear a lot just because we focus in that space on like the memberships, we focus on customer loyalty, retention, etc. It's oftentimes something that we see like smaller shops really try to struggle to understand why it's so important before they implement some of these broader programs. And it's just interesting because I think, especially with the changes right now, when it comes to AI, that's changing every industry we see. And so, like, even something as simple as like a Google search to find your local HVAC shop, it's just more expensive. Not sure if the same results are going to show up because of the AI search algorithms. And so right now we do see it's like such a good time to invest in your customers and people you're already servicing. And I mean, just in the context of this episode for selling one day, like that's, it's interesting you talk about that being like one of the key indicators.
Well, and here's the thing, Wes. We were talking about private equity, and obviously that's all the talk. You're not going to outspend them, right? You can't, as a company doing $1.5 million, $2 million in sales, you're not going to outspend for marketing a company that's doing 100 million or 500 million or $2 billion in sales. So you're not going to compete there. So where I think the opportunity to compete is deepening that relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having a loyal customer who's not out shopping you. And so I see it a lot with the smaller companies. They often don't have maintenance programs, and their rationale is, well, we get busy. I can't go run a $100 maintenance tune-up and turn down a $500 service call. And so they're right. At the end of the day, there's only so many calls they can make, but then they can't seem to get over that hurdle, right? So where I see maintenance and deepening customer relationship is start leading with the maintenance program and building your customer base. So then in the shoulder season, you can keep the guys there or girls there and keep them running calls where you're not having to lay people off. And so it's kind of the chicken before the egg, right? Do I hire somebody before I have the work? And where does that go? And that's where I see people get in this hamster wheel, and they stay at $1 million or less in sales because they never make the hire, because they never have enough work for them when it's slower. And then when it's busy, they can't get to all the work, and it creates this vicious cycle where I've seen it, where they've invested in a maintenance program, whatever it may be, with smart AC equipment or just maintenances in general, investing in that maintenance program and making that a priority. Well, then they are able to attract and retain people, and they also are able to develop younger talent. That's where I really see companies successful. Everybody's scrambling for the same technicians, And where a smaller company can invest in somebody, I believe in the hire for attitude, train for aptitude mentality, right? Bring somebody in that may not be an incredible technician yet, but you can bring them in, you can pay them less money, and you can have them learn by starting with maintenances, right? They can get out and they can
Yeah.
get into the customer's home. They can look at systems. If they identify an issue, then you can bring in a senior tech. And so you're able to train and develop talent where you're not throwing them to the wolves, right? Or you're not bringing in a $40 an hour guy or girl who you don't even know if they're that good, right? Just
Yeah.
because they've been in the industry doesn't mean they're a great technician. And so that's where I think maintenance and maintenance programs are so important. It's developing talent. It's minimizing marketing spend. It's not as salesy of an environment. I just think it covers a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, it's interesting. We at Smart AC we talk a lot about what you mentioned, but we don't often talk much about like the employee retention and like how to approach it that way. So that's like really interesting to me, and I'm sure people listening to this, it's just good advice for them generally, I think, because in the context of this episode, one thing you did also mention was you look at the employees and their tenure and stuff, and that's another factor there. Buyers don't want to be acquiring a company that all new technicians or what a lot of employee turnover, I'm assuming.
Put yourself in a buyer's shoes. I mean, even if you haven't ever bought a heating and air company, if I give you two companies to look at, and one of them, the average tenure is 7 months, and the other one has a full staff that they brought in when they were 19 years old and have trained them and they're like family, and who do you think's going to stay, right? Do you think that that 7 month technician who's been at 10 companies in the last 10 years is going to stay, or the technician who came in when they were younger, were given a career opportunity, were given training, are loyal to the company, are loyal to the customers, right? If I'm a
Yeah.
buyer, I'm going to put more weight on that, and I'm going to believe those people are going to want to stay, and they're probably better employees.
Yeah. I agree with you. All right. So I want to transition to the next segment, and I want to talk a little bit about like how to time the sale. So let's say hypothetically an owner maybe one day wants to retire in the next like 5, 10 years, or maybe they just get a good, they're having some growth and they just want a clean exit. Like, how far in advance should an owner start to think about this and prepare for these conversations?
In my opinion, the day they open the business, right? Yesterday is when they should be doing it. Too many people I meet with, I sit down with them and they're 65, 70 years old and they're done,
Mhm.
right? And I do evaluation and the business is not worth what they thought it was worth. And now what do? They go back at 70 years old and start rebuilding, start working harder. Doing it when you're young and building a business to sell, not just because you have to sell it, but a business that maximizes sale price is an easier business to run. It's more profitable business. It's easier. It's a lot more fun. And then you don't have to sell it, right? You've got people in place and you've got systems in place and you have training in place and you have loyal customers and you have repeat revenue. All those things, it's an easier business to run. And so we preach, get a valuation done every year. I don't care if you want to sell 10 years from now or 20 years from now. Most people don't really have an idea what their business is worth. And so we do valuations for free. I have a YouTube channel. One of my most watched videos is Your Baby's Ugly. And it's a joke, right? Talking about most business owners, their business is their baby, right? My kids were raised in the office. My wife has worked with me and we've, spent years building it, and it's their baby. And I have to sit down with them and say, hey, it's ugly. Nobody wants it. And so it rips your heart out. And so after doing hundreds of those meetings with people and saying, hey, you've done it wrong for all these years, we started preaching, get a valuation done. And we do free valuations for anybody. We probably do 3 or 4 a week at this point,
Yeah.
where there's no strings attached. We're not going to spam you. We're not going to call you and say you need to sell. It's here's what it's worth. And if you want to sell in 5 years from now, next year come back and we'll do it again and let's see if it's grown. And in that, we talk about things that we think you should focus on to increase the value of your business. Better maintenance program, better staff retention, better training, cleaner books, staying away from new construction. So in those valuations, we're going to identify things that we think you should focus on. And then next year, let's do it again. And then next year, let's do it again. Because here's what's happening is, once again, private equity is not the devil, in my opinion. They're not all bad, but they're pounding the phones, right? They're calling everybody saying, we want to buy your business. They're sending them emails. They're sending them letters. And they're professional buyers. It's what they do all day, every day. Most of my clients have never sold a company in their life, and their company's their biggest asset. And so I want to at least arm them. So if a buyer does come to the table, if somebody makes them an offer, they're able to say, yeah, that's probably close to what my business is worth is not. Too many people I meet, and they'll tell me what they sold their business for, and I'm like, wow, why did you take that? Well, they told me that's what the market is. Well, it's like going to a barber and saying, do I need a haircut? Well, of course you do, right? And a buyer's going to do everything they can to buy your business as cheap as they can. It's in their
Yeah.
best interest to save money. So at least arming yourself so you know what it's worth in today's market. If it's not worth what you want it to be worth, then start putting a plan in place to maximize that value. So I'll get off my soapbox. I know it's a long-winded answer for what you wanted to hear, but really, you should always be getting a valuation done and planning the business to sell. Because here on the flip side, and here's the sad side of it, 2 times last year, or this year, I guess it would be, I had people who I talked to about selling their business. One of them said, it's not ready. I'm going to wait and sell in the future. The other ones just started sending me the stuff for evaluation. Those 2 scenarios, 2 separate deals, their wives called me and said, hey, my husband was talking to you about selling the business. Wants to let you know he died. And we need to sell the business. And he was the only license holder. And, the problems go on and on. They were the only ones who worked in the business, whatever the case may be. And they weren't ready to sell. And now it's a fire sale because the wife
Yeah.
didn't run the business, doesn't know anything about it, doesn't have a license. The guys are quitting. It just creates this disaster where if they would have had a plan in place, it could have been, hey, we know what the valuation is. We already have things lined up. We've been doing things right. We've got a lot of maintenance agreements. We've got a second in command ready to step up and become an assistant manager or general manager. So doing those things ahead of time really protects your family.
Yeah. That is, I mean, I was going to ask you, like, what are some of the dangers of waiting too long or not staying up on this? But I think you've kind of just talked through a real life example, and
And that's
it's
worst case
sad.
scenario,
Yeah.
right? I don't want to be gloom and doom, but that's worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But but the other cases are waiting too long. I've had people that called me and they had a big business, they had a lot of employees, they've started aging, they started slowing down, it hasn't been a priority, and they were doing 3 million in sales and now they're doing 2 million. And they used to have 15 guys and now they've got 5. And so and now when we go to market, we're not selling a business doing 3 million, we're selling one doing 2 million. We're
Yeah.
not one that's selling a business that's growing. We're selling a business that's declining because they've gotten tired, right? It's
Hmm.
not priority to them, or they've had a health issue, or they lost. I've had several where they've lost key people. They had a great saleswoman that had been with them forever and was knocking it out of the park, and she retired, and now they're trying to replace her. Or a great technician, and he was kind of a service tech, but he was also kind of a service manager and controlled the guys, and now he retired and now we're scrambling. And so waiting too long to understand that is huge, in my opinion.
So what I'm hearing just in closing of this segment is like preparation and just like always staying on top of where your business is valued. Just you may not be in the place or want to sell it right now, but you should always have that knowledge of how much your valuation is just in case like something happens or you get an offer and you're not unprepared.
And I've had people that we've done a valuation for, and they said, "Wow, if you could sell it for that, sell it now." I mean, they weren't even ready, but the dollar figure checked their boxes. Once again, if it's your largest asset, it's worth more than your house is worth, more than your bank account's worth, worth more than all these things. You should know what it's worth.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't be a guess. And too often, obviously you and I have seen each other at every trade show across the country.
Yeah.
At these trade shows, somebody gets up on stage and said, "Oh, I've sold my company for 20 time multiple or a 10 time multiple." And the reality is, if you haven't seen the check, they're lying. right? I look at a lot of these deals and I see them get up on stage and I'm thinking, wow, how'd they say that? I saw their numbers. There's no way that happened. Or they finance the whole transaction, right? They didn't get a check. They if they hit certain numbers over the next 10 years, they'll get that check. And so
Hmm.
if somebody sitting in the audience though thinks, oh wow, if he sold his for 10 times, mine's worth 10 times. And they don't really know. And so that's what they think in the back of their mind. Well, it's my business is worth now. And
Yeah.
they're not. And so my thing is find out what yours is worth so you know.
Yeah. Reality is often different than speculation, right?
Absolutely. Or what somebody says on stage
Yeah.
or on a social media post. There's lots of that taking place as well.
Yeah. Yeah. People do things for clicks, right? At the end of the day.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next segment I want to talk about, and we've touched on some of these today, but just like common mistakes that people make when they're looking at selling their business. So I don't know if you have just anything different than what you've said, but like what are the biggest mistakes that owners make when they're in the process of selling, and then what can kill a deal late in the process?
Yeah, a couple. We have talked about it, but we can kind of go in more detail. I think be beneficial. One, keeping clean books and records, right? Running a business to save taxes and running a business to sell is a different business. And so many people think, well, I'm just saving taxes and everybody does it, but I'm going to get paid for it. The reality is you're not oftentimes. So that's the first thing. The second thing is taking their eye off the prize. Lots of times when somebody will list a business with me, they take their foot off the gas and they
Hmm.
focus on retirement and not focus on growing the business and their numbers are declining. And so it has an impact on selling price and that can really crush a deal. Not
Yeah.
knowing the numbers is another one. You know, people think I had a deal. We just sold a company long ago and they thought they had 2,000 maintenance agreements. In due diligence, if we found out after going through the numbers they had 400.
Big
Well,
difference.
business, that's a huge difference. And so not knowing your numbers has a drastic impact on selling price. Not building a business that can stand alone, right? I've sold companies and we'll use this name just as an example because I've sold it. Bob's Heating and Air. Bob did all the work. Bob was on every Google review. And so when a buyer comes to buy it, they say, what happens when Bob leaves? I'm not buying a business. I'm buying a customer list, right? Because Bob's out the
Yeah.
door and now we don't have a technician. We don't have an installer. We don't have a salesperson. We don't have a bookkeeper. If you're the best of all those at your company, you don't have a company. You have a well-paying job. And I'm not saying that you have to build a big, enormous company, right? At the end of the day, you don't have to do that, but just understand that you're going to get paid based on that. So if you just have a job, you're going to get paid based on what just a job pays, as opposed to what a company's going to pay.
Yeah. Something you mentioned, I was just curious. I don't know if you know the answer, but like in the example of someone doing some due diligence on saying they had 2,000 maintenance agreements, they find out they only have 400. Like, does that completely kill the deal, or does that just hurt the valuation of the potential amount?
Normally, it would kill the deal. And here's why. Deals fall apart because of buyer and seller expectations. So if a buyer thinks that they're buying a business with 2,000 maintenance agreements, and the seller thinks they're selling a business for X amount of dollars, when there's a material change like that, it's going to hurt valuation. And oftentimes, the seller doesn't recognize how bad it really is going to hurt valuation.
Hmm.
So if I tell you we're going to sell your business for $1 million, and then I come back to you and say, hey, because of what they found, now it's 700,000 or 600,000 or 500,000. Now is it worth it for you to sell, right? Because in your own mind, it's like buying a lottery ticket. You know, when I don't play the lottery often, but when I do and I'm driving home, I'm thinking, oh, when I win, I'm going to buy this and I'm going to buy that. I'm going to buy this. And it's the same thing when we tell somebody, hey, you got an offer for $1 million or $5 million or $10 million. The wheels are going, right? And I'm going to pay this off and I'm going to buy this retirement house and where my wife and I are going to do this. And now you can't. So it completely changes the perspective in a seller's eyes, but obviously in a buyer's eyes, it does as, a material change like that. And maintenance agreements was just the example. We've had it where they've
Yeah.
been in accounting, right? They made a mistake in accounting and didn't know it. It wasn't malicious. It wasn't intentional. But now the numbers are drastically different than what the buyer thought they were buying. And the purchase price is going to reflect that.
Is there something that owners think increases value but actually hurts
Wow.
that they do? That was a sorry, kind of a random question, but
No, that's a great question that I've never been asked. Owners oftentimes just focus on gross sales, right? Well, I increase sales, so everything should be good. Growth is expensive. And so these companies that are trying to grow at a rapid pace, they're spending a ridiculous amount of money on marketing and they're not making any money.
yeah,
And so they just think gross, 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 and net is often more important than gross. And a buyer's looking, when a buyer buys a business, they're looking, if I'm going to invest X amount of dollars, how long is it going to take me to pay that back? And so if you're not making any money, it's going to take a long time. Too often buyers focus on the multiple, right? When somebody calls me and we start talking about selling, I'll say, what does a check need to say for you to walk away? They're like, oh, it needs to be an 8-time multiple. Well, you can't cash a multiple, right? You can't eat a multiple. You can cash the check that goes into your bank account. And so I focus more on what's the check going to say, because you hear people bragging about multiples. Well, if your business was not making any money, if you're making 50 grand a year and you got a 10-time multiple, or you're making $500,000 a year and got a 5-time multiple, it's drastically different numbers, right? And so people focus on that gross sale and multiple number way too much instead of net income and what is the business really doing.
I know you used to have an HVAC company, correct?
My son owns it today.
That's amazing. Family business.
Yep, son owns it today. Him and my daughter-in-law bought it. Wow, it's probably been 7 years ago now, maybe 8 years ago. I have to look, but yeah.
So if you were running your business still today, what would you change if you were running it today versus when you were doing it?
From when I owned it 10 years ago, you mean? What would I do differently? Uh,
Yeah.
Staff development. I learned that from a company I was selling. I sold a company in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He had 13 employees, and every employee there had never been in the heating and air business till he came to work for him.
Wow.
He would find good people at places he shopped, that had a great personality, or he'd watch them working real hard. He would give them opportunities to have careers. And he had an incredible loyal employee base that were all good people, right? He hired the person and taught him the trades. And so I would have done that instead of just hiring the next technician who said he could fix air conditioners. I would have focused more on maintenance, and I would have I would have built a business to sell better. I've been a broker for years,
Hmm.
and I listed a heating and air company for sale and I bought it, and then I ran it. And so I learned the industry from an outsider's perspective.
Yeah.
And then my son came to work for me. I told him I was going to sell the business. He said he wanted to buy it, and he bought it. And then now I have the luxury of peeling back the curtain at all these incredible businesses, right? I look at
Yeah.
so many businesses every day, and I can really see what works and what doesn't, not just financially, but having a life, right? Running a business is challenging, right? At the end of the day, it's not easy to be self-employed. And so I get to see, I see businesses where owners only work a couple hours a week. I see businesses where companies make 20 or 30% net income. So I get to see some exceptions to the rule and how they did it. And it's people. We're in the people business, right? If you're in heating and air, it's a people business.
Yeah.
It's not just fixing air conditioners. You're dealing with customers, you're dealing with employees, you're dealing with supply houses. It's the people business. And so I think focusing on the people more. I grew up, and I'm obviously older than you, Wes, but I grew up where you worked until the work was done. And whether that was 6 hours or 12 hours, you just worked, right? And now the workforce is different and they value spending more time at home, probably more than I did, because I didn't know that existed, right? I was just happy to have a job and nobody had to come and thank me for coming to work. And that's a different mentality today. And I wasn't real good at that as a business owner. If it's 5 o'clock and we got another call in, I have no problem dispatching another call to somebody at 5 o'clock. You're getting paid. You ought to be happy you're getting paid. That was my mentality at working. And the more I worked, the more money I made, and that was motivating to me. I now realize that that doesn't motivate everybody. And so I get to see how people are doing it better with today's workforce. And it comes from training, developing, giving them the proper skills, and
Yeah.
letting them tell you what's important to you, not just what's important to you needs to be important to them.
I think for every owner, operator listening, they really ought to pay attention to what you just said over the last minute or two, just because like that's real advice that you give based on like how you approach this and how you've worked in this industry and how you've worked with owners looking to sell. And so I think that's real advice and people should definitely listen to it. In my
Yeah,
opinion, at least.
and certainly I didn't create it, right? I stole it from everybody
Yeah.
else watching it, where I'd walk into a business and be like, "Wow, this is incredible. How'd you do it?" And here's how they did it. It wasn't a busy Fourth of July weekend and they needed another tech and they ran an ad and they got a tech and now he just happens to be fantastic. He's been here for 3 years and we started him as an installer and then put him into maintenance and then we gave him a career and he was able to buy his first car and buy his first house and take care of his family. And and that owner was able to change that employee's life, right? By the opportunities they gave them. And if it's not right for them, that the one in South Carolina, off topic, he would go see people and he would offer them a job and he'd say, listen, don't quit your job. When's your day off? Come work a day with us and let's see if it's any good. We'll pay you. And at the end of the day, he'd sit down with the staff that person went with and said, hey, what do you think? Do you think you could work here? And they'd say, yeah, you can, or no, he can't. And then he'd go to the person and say, hey, do you see yourself doing this kind of work? And if they say yes, fantastic, then let's get you onboarded. And if not, we'll pay you for the day, we'll buy you lunch, go back to your other job, everything's okay. Um, and if they brought somebody in and it wasn't a good fit, he said, "Hey, I promise you, if after being here you don't want to work here, we'll find you someplace else to get a job. I know enough people in town. We'll find you someplace else to work." And he would do that. He would help them. If it wasn't a fit, what do you want to do? Well, I want to change tires. Great. I know somebody owns a tire shop. Let's call them up and we'll get you a job changing tires. And and so it wasn't you had to love the job and you had to stay here and you had to do all these things. It was a team approach and it was incredible to me. I showed up there to list his business and I was there at 7 o'clock in the morning. I drove by early. I was supposed to be in him at 8, drove by at 7, and two guys were outside washing their vans at 7 o'clock in the morning on a Monday morning.
Wow.
Man, seen that. So when I got there, I said, hey, your vans sure are shiny. Shower your guy out here washing. He was like, what? Those guys here washing the vans? And I said, yeah. And he said, which ones? And I said, those two that I walked past over there. He's like, hang on. And he went and gave them gift cards for lunch. They didn't have to do it. They did it because they wanted to. And he
They're
rewarded them.
prideful. Yeah.
Absolutely. And he rewarded them for it. And
Yeah.
so I was like, man, I'd never seen anything like that. Hey, you need to be here. You need to have a shiny van. I came from this, we're going to bark out orders mentality. And I've learned that doesn't work real well in today's environment.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that the story you just told about the owner in South Carolina, I mean, I think that's why this industry is just at its best is what he embodied. And like I like working in this industry because I am a people person also, and the best operators are people persons. And so I love hearing stories like that.
Yeah, and I get to see it, right? That wasn't a one-off. That was the first time I saw it. It was like the third or fourth heating and air company I sold. And all I had in my mind was the way I ran my business. I wasn't giving out gift cards for lunch, right? So it was a slap in my face of, wow, what could you have built had you built it this way? And now I see it all over the country. I see people doing something similar. Now my son took over from me, had a learning curve because he was raised with me yelling and screaming, and this is, be happy you're going to work kind of thing. And now he's hiring young people, sending them to Ultimate Tech Academy, getting them an education. So he doesn't have an in-house training. He's sending them off to get trained and sending them to get trained. And they're coming back with more knowledge than he has. And he's developing people, and they don't all stay. But the ones that do stay, you're glad they stayed. And you're glad you sent them off.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, well, so I think this has been great having you on today. I really appreciate you joining. How do people hear more about what you do, or if they want this free evaluation? Like, tell us about how they find you.
Yeah, so my website, businessmodificationgroup.com. My name's Patrick Lange. Obviously, I'm on all social media, Facebook, LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out. Give us a call. My phone number's on everything. Give the office a call, 850-669-2498. You can email us directly on there on the center of my website. Click here for a free valuation so they don't have to search real far. Any way they can, I'm happy to help any way I can. I really appreciate the invite being on here, Wes. Thank you for having me. Obviously, we've been friends for a number of years, and I appreciate you thinking of me coming on. I had a great time as always, and if there's anything I could do to help out, I'd love an opportunity.
Well, we appreciate having you on, and I always learn something new every time I talk to you, and I'm sure if I'm learning something new every time, and we've had a ton of conversations, I'm sure our listeners will also really enjoy this episode. And again, if you're focused on building a more valuable HVAC business, like, keep in touch with our show, follow it, subscribe it wherever you listen to podcasts. And Patrick, again, thank you for coming on, and everyone go check out his website, businessmodificationgroup.com, right?
Yep, that's it.
And
thank you so
go
much
get your free evaluation. Patrick said earlier this episode you should be getting one every year. So
absolutely, we're happy to do them, so please do it.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for coming on, and really appreciate this.
Absolutely.